Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 25.5 ADC tier list. So if you want content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There weren't a huge amount of changes towards the ADC role this patch. A lot of those will come in the next patch in 0.6, but for this patch we saw direct buffs towards Aphelios and Seraphine. We also saw a direct nerf towards Ashe as like a compensation for the fact that they overbuffed her in the previous patch, gave her a lot more power in her ultimate, so they took some of that power away. But other than that, the tier list stays relatively similar, so let's get into it. The D tier is going to start off with Mel. She still heavily underperforms across all three roles which she's played in. This champion, I imagine, will get buffed down the line. Isn't being buffed in 0.6, it'll probably buff her in 0.7, I imagine. But overall, this pick, it doesn't have a huge skill curve. A lot of the snap timings come from her W and making sure you're making effective use out of that ability. Past that, she acts relatively similar to a traditional mage, and the fact that she's been so egregiously nerfed because of frustration problems and is still relatively frustrating with how her ultimate functions, they might follow up with some like work to this pick, and for the moment she does remain as like a D tier option. You can make her work in certain spots. She's not unplayable. I'd just say she's considerably worse than some of the other mages you can opt into. In the case of Kalista, she's just a very hard marksman to play. Tapped down with a direct nerf in the previous patch to try and make her less of an oppressive option for her first stand. She definitely did lose some power there. Her damage when paired with a support getting out of that W mark isn't as high, and yeah, that's meaningful. I still think this pick, if you're very comfortable on it, can still be very valuable, and it's still definitely one of the priority picks in competitive, showing that, yeah, in the right spots, this champion can just have a huge amount of value, and if played correctly with the right pairings, there is still a lot to gain from this pick. So definitely, if you want to play Kalista, you can. Just not a pick I'm really going to recommend for her difficulty. In the case of Kai'Sa, I would say this champion's more just bad at the moment. She doesn't have as much flexibility with her builds. You're primarily just playing the AP hybrid on hit with the like the Nashers, the Ginsus, and then like the Kraken or the Static to lead off with. This pick just isn't doing too well at the moment. If you enjoy her though, you can definitely make her work. As with most of the other picks on this list, I would say she's just the weakest marksman at the moment, alongside Smolder, who is also very much underperforming. Champion is being buffed in 0.6 alongside Kai'Sa, so in fact both these picks will probably jump up to at least the C tier, maybe even the B tier. Smolder's getting a pretty hefty list of changes. Smolder, with the IE change, did find a new build pattern, and that did help him. I think this pick, if you get to like your 2-3 item spikes with your stacks, can be quite a valuable addition to your composition. But before that, he just isn't as good as a lot of the other marksmen. He tends to be pretty underwhelming, pretty gold hungry, and as a pick, just not something I would really recommend. But with the changes in 0.6, definitely worth keeping your eye on this champion. He could definitely shoot up the list. Moving on to the C tier, then we have some picks which I think you can definitely make work. The likes of Samira got buffed more recently. They took her through attack speed duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, which obviously if you get a kill, it refreshes the E, and you can obviously maintain that attack speed uptime. So there's definitely a quality of life slash, well, I mean, just outright buff there. It helps her with her tower sieging as well. Is it enough to really push her into the meta? No, she could probably do a slight bit more, but I don't think this champion's bad. I think if you can, like, get your item spikes, I mean, Samira as a champion has next to no build flexibility. She is probably the most locked to a specific build champion in the game, but, like, if you can get to, like, your Dark, your Full Collector, your IE, stuff like that, then this champion can be quite good, and if you can get the ball rolling, snowballing, then, yeah, I think there's definitely value to this kind of a pick, but she's a lot more composition reliant, and as a blind pick just doesn't really work. You want to be able to see your support, see what kind of composition you're playing into to really get value out of this kind of champion. Lucian has just fallen kind of flat as of recent. He's still a fine pick, and with certain pairings definitely elevates his potential as a champion. And he is being buffed in 0.6, so there will be some more value. Like the ECDs going from 19 to 12 to like 16 to 12, I believe, which is meaningful. That is going to help him early, and if he can like sync up with specific timings on abilities, I think there is definitely more value to gain out of his champion. Will it push him to the B tier? Maybe. He's not a, like, he's a relatively high end C tier option. I think you can still get value out of his pick, especially like late early into mid game. I think that's where he really shines as a champion, but he does get outscaled by most other options with the amount of range that they can provide, and tends to be like the item spikes which they can come online with. Draven sits within the C tier, another difficulty one. I think a lot of these C tier options are some of the harder marksmen you can play in the game. Yeah, your Samiras, your Dravens, your Kallistas, even your Kai'Sa and Lucians are all relatively hard marksmen to pick up. Aphelios is here for a relatively similar reason. In Draven's case, he is an incredibly oppressive early game champion, and if you're good at Draven, he's actually really good at the moment. Like in Elite, this pick is still one of the top performing ADCs in the game, and if you snowball, you can close out games. This champion, one of your best options. For average play though, he tends to always be below the bar, and that is when he is balanced for the most part. This champion, if he's ever doing too well for the average player, is probably completely stomping Elite and supporting way too high of a ban rate. Right now though, I mean, he's being nerfed in 0.6, not a huge nerf. It will basically not change him for the average player, but it is a slight tap down. He will remain as a C2 option. In the case of Aphelios, he got a buff this patch and his win rate went down because the pick rates went up, and he's a hard champion. Like, that is the main kind of thing with Aphelios. I think the pick, even before these buffs, was decent. I think if you can pilot Aphelios, this champion can print damage. He does just need to get to his item spikes, and that can be one of the main kind of like factors against this champion, is he needs gold to function as a pick. You can rotate, like if you rotate his weapons effectively and you know exactly what you want to take into what fight, and you can get rid of or deplete the ammo, and then you're like cycling between what weapon you want, then there's lots of skill to that, and spacing, making sure you're just getting the most out of the champion is really valuable, and I think that is where the depth of this champion comes in. And if you get the gold, he can print damage. Moving on to, actually no, I'm going to drop one other champion down to the C tier. That is Brand. Brand has a decent win rate for ADC. That does come at the cost of like mostly Nami pairings. I think outside of Nami pairing, this champion really does suffer in the bot lane. Nami obviously providing slows allows Brand to more consistently hit his abilities, plus it synergizes with the abilities just in general. I think this pick is in a pretty bad spot across all 4 of his roles at the moment. Not a champion I'd really recommend, but can still function in mid to low MMR. That is where Brand does best, but even then he's kind of underwhelming. So yeah, I mean, if you want to play him, you can, but not a pick I'd really recommend in his current state. Some of the other AP options which I'm not really recommending are like your Zig, or I mean, in the case of Ziggs, he's just kind of fallen out of the meta. I still think this pick, if you're playing around your sieging, your wave clear, which is incredibly obnoxious, and you'll just sit back and like stalling out, can be fine, but I think as a general carry option for the bot lane, not great, and you want a bit more agency when in solo queue. In the case of Lux, she can work in the bot lane. She could probably sit slightly below Ziggs. I think Lux requires more gold and better conditions to really function as a pick here, but in most spots, she can be quite a valuable AP option, especially as like a flex pick. I'm going to drop Veigar down. I think Veigar, in general, has just been struggling a bit more in bot lane. The changes that he did back along to, well, I mean, just nerfing his base armor down, combined with changing his AP ratios to be scaling AP ratios on his abilities, just makes him a lot more level reliant, and bot lane Veigar is incredibly low elo skewed. So if you're like gold below, this pick's still fine. If you're like gold to plat to emerald, it doesn't do as well. It's just more like an A tier option, and then like diamond above, it does fall off quite aggressively. If you're comfortable playing it though, then you should still be able to find relatively similar amounts of value. Hui, I had already dropped down. Hui obviously got tagged pretty heavily in the previous patch. They nerfed a lot of his excess damage, and it was meaningful. It hurt him in support, it hurt him in bot lane, and it hurt him in the mid lane. So this champion, I still think, is a great mage to have within your pool. Probably not definitely not the premier mage in bot lane at the moment, but if you enjoy it, you can still definitely find results and value out of a champion. Still say he sits like a tier above the other 3 mages in here at the moment, just as like a high B, whereas all the others are like more like a low B to mid B kind of picks. The other champions within my B tier are the likes of Xayah, who is an incredibly conditional marksman. If you find the right spots, Xayah can have a great amount of value. Individual carry though, not great. I wouldn't really recommend maining her for solo queue. But if you're very comfortable with a champion, you can bring her out in the right spots, then she can definitely have value. I think Jhin as a pick at the moment is on the one of the weaker sides, one of the weaker spots he's been in for a while. He is being buffed in 0.6 and has seen competitive play, so I don't think this champion is by any means unplayable. I think in the right spots he can have value, but definitely not the basically every game kind of can be a Jin game champion, but he was in the previous season before he got like nerfed 2 or 3 times, I think it was. Zeri sits within my B tier. Once again, if you get a lot of gold on this champion and you get past your early game, she can be incredibly valuable. Pairs really nicely with like your Yumis, your Lulus, enchanters, which can like provide her with like the tools she wants to carry. You could also pair her with Engage and she can be fine. Like, I think Zeri isn't locked to enchanters anymore, but as a pick, yeah, it just requires a lot of gold and wants to get through the early game. Access to level 6 is really important for her. Ezreal and Varus sit at the high end of the B tier. Ezreal obviously scales massively with the amount, like, if you play, Ezreal is an incredibly pilot-reliant champion, and if you can pilot Ezreal well, he is one of the best ADCs in the game. If you pilot Ezreal badly, he is one of the worst ADC options in the game. It literally just comes down to how well can you, how consistently can you land your abilities, and how well do you understand, like, to get the most out of Ezreal's damage, whether that's, like, stacking passive on the wave, maintaining lethal tempo uptime, using tempo to, like, push wave, or if you're, like, opting into PTA and Conqueror, how you effectively are using those keystones. There's just a lot of depth to Ezreal, and I think if you pilot this champion well, he's incredibly good. I think if you pilot him poorly, he will really struggle, and I'd recommend looking towards other, maybe easier or different picks. Varus is an incredible marksman at the moment, especially in Elite. He is #1 recommended go-to marksman. He is probably the most blindable option because of his, well, 2 different builds. You can play Lethality Varus, or you can play On-Hit Varus. Traditionally, you are going to be playing Lethality Varus in competitive. I think On-Hit performs slightly better in solo queue. You can opt into durability when you're playing On-Hit, and I think it just gives you a lot of tools to deal with a lot of different champions. He's very hard to itemize against. He has hard CC within his kit, which is a very powerful thing for a marksman to have. The main difficulty is he's a bit harder to play. You tend to want your team to be like playing around you a bit more to really get full value out of a champion, which is why I don't have him as one of the higher things for solo queue. But if you are provided with the environment which you want to be provided with, Varus is an incredible pick at the moment. Definitely a champion you just want to have within your ADC pool. I think he is in an amazing spot at the moment. Moving on to the A tier, we had the addition of Tristana to the A tier last patch, and honestly, she's getting closer to the high end of the A tier now. I think Tristana as a pick has really picked up a lot of traction as of recently. She's doing really well at the moment, and definitely a champion which I would recommend learning now that things have kind of like shifted around, and yeah, she's very clearly doing quite well in the bot lane at the moment. Vayne and Twitch hit towards the end of the low end of the A tier. These are very solo queue like tied champions. Vayne performs relatively well below Master, but struggles quite a bit the higher up you go, where she doesn't have access to the same level of range and wave clear a lot of other marksmen do, which is where she really struggles as an option. In Twitch's case, the nerf towards Axiom Arcanist did affect him. He now sits as more like a low A tier option, but if you're very comfortable playing Twitch, he is a fine pick to be playing at the moment. I think some of your AP options here are the likes of Carver, Swain, Victor. All these picks still perform really well in the bot lane. In Carver's case, he's incredibly unpopular to the point where I could remove him and people probably wouldn't complain, but I do think he's an incredible pick, and if you put a lot of time into him, is an incredibly valuable bot lane to have within your pool. If you prefer something like Swain and you want to play into like shorter range compositions, he's a great option, so definitely recommend leaning towards Swain in those situations. Victor is a great flex option if you play both mid and bot lane. Then yeah, he's a great champion to have within your pool. Great mid game, great wave clear. He's very similar to Hui within that pattern, just not the same level of range, and relies a bit more on his mid game to like get the most out of the champion. The other picks within the A tier include the likes of Sivir, Corki, and actually we've got a couple more in the A tier. I'll go through once I've added them all. So in the case of Seraphine, she got bumped up from the B tier to the A tier. She had a damage amp to the Q, which is really good for bot lane Seraphine. She benefits somewhat the most out of her roles. It just gives her a bit more damage to work with, which is very nice. It allows her to wave clear more effectively, it allows her to trade more effectively against champions, and that is exactly what she wants. So Seraphine bumped back up to the A tier. In the case of Sivir, she is a great counterpick option at the moment. She can stall out really well. She's great wave clear, pretty hard to kill for that reason, where like the spell she'll combine with the wave clear makes her a pretty undivable champion. She does lose against a lot of picks like early on to the game, but once you get to your items and you can like bounce around a lot of damage, she is an incredibly powerful marksman pick. Caitlyn's range makes her incredibly oppressive early. Does fall off a bit mid game, but like if you get access to like 3-4 items later on to the game, she does a huge amount of damage, and those headshots can like one-shot targets for the most part. In the case of Corki, he is number 1 early game marksman at the moment. For average play, I would say, yeah. Draven for like elite, I'd still probably say he's number 1, but like Corki is like a number 2 option. If you play this, I mean, he's a lot easier to play as well. So if you want to just pick something up which is a lot more accessible and very early game skewed, then Corki is going to be my recommended option there, and that's why he sits as the high end of the A tier. Not quite an S tier champion. I think he has issues in terms of his scaling compared to some other options, and the lower down you go, the longer the games go on, and Corki loses value against some of the scaling picks, and yeah, that is the reason why I have him as like an A tier option at the moment. In the case of Ashe, she had a tap that, well, she got buffed, and the buffs were really nice for her, gave her a lot more power in her ultimate, especially damage wise, so they stripped some of that power away, drops her back down to the A tier. So I think this pick is really good if you're looking for like a utility option in the bot lane. The S tier stays the same. The Yas, well, I'll lead off with Kog'Maw. So Kog'Maw is probably the low end of the S tier. I think in the right spots, this pick is an incredibly powerful option. But the direct nerfs to him and Kog'Maw and Lulu could probably arguably drop him down to the A tier, but I just really value him as a pick with the amount of like options he can opt into, combined with the split damage, combined with some of the support pairings. I think this champion is an incredibly powerful pick to have at the moment. I say Nyla is very support reliant, but in the right combo, she is one of the strongest marksmen within the game. Her damage is incredibly powerful. Her burst is also really high. The itemization is primarily just going to be like a lot of AD. They haven't really pushed it towards attack speed as of like her builds, but yeah, if you're opting into like your collectors, your IEs, your shield bows, your BT, stuff like that, very similar profile to Samira, but outputs a huge amount of damage and has different pairings traditionally, which you can value. The likes of MF and Yas still sit behind of the S tier. MF got nerfed more recently and did lose a bit from that, but still an incredibly powerful marksman to play at the moment. Very easy, has access to a lot of casting marksman capabilities, which is pretty unique towards some of the other marksmen, which are just your traditional auto attackers. So I'd say there's definitely value in that. But yeah, mostly the ease of play and certain pairings, which MF really benefits from, is like the strength of the champion. In the case of Yasuo, I think he is an incredibly powerful pick at the moment. The changes they made to his crit, like the Q crit, well, no, actually just crit in general for the Yasuo. They removed the crit, like the punishment for like the fact that he gets double value from crit, was really big for him. It enables him to scale it a lot better, and that is something that Yasuo was probably struggling from a bit more than anything. Yasuo already has a really good early game and access to like your Bork and then your Shilbo IE. Spike's incredibly hard now. The IE being cheaper as well, all really big things for him, and I'd say he really deserves a spot within the S tier at the moment. Really powerful pick, especially when you pair him with like a knock-up support. That is like the condition. And Jinx, I still think Jinx is the premier marksman of the patch, or just like the last couple of patches. She's being nerfed in 0.6, and that will probably dethrone her as the premier pick. But in her current state, she has access to so much damage, and if she ever gets like 1, 2, 3 kills within the game, she can oftentimes just take over, and that is an incredibly powerful thing to have at the moment. Yeah, I wouldn't say she quite has the same agency as some of the other marksmen. She does have hard CC in the E, but not like as consistent hard CC as like your Ashes and your Varuses. But if you get gold on this champion, she is one of the best, if not just outright the best snowballing option, which can like scale really well into the late game pick at the moment. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.